Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Raymond. So today we are going to look at how we can create a CRUD operation using Node.js as well as Express. So I've opened up this picture here just to show you how any application works. So this is the client side, and it can be Facebook, it can be WhatsApp, it can be anything. Then when a user is there on the website or application, maybe they want to post something, maybe on a blog, or maybe they want to request data from the server. So what happens is, whatever they do, they are going to send a request to the server. Now the server is going to communicate with the application server as well as the application programming interface, which is the API. So what this does for the application server, there mainly is authentication as well as authorization that occurs there. Then the web API performs all these operations of create, read, update, and delete, which we normally call as CRUD. Create, read, update, and delete. Okay. Now, after all these processes occurs, the aim is to reach the database if there is a database, and from there a user maybe can request their login information. Then some authentication is going to occur. Then all these processes will work together to give the client back a response. So you can read more about this to understand that much better. But that's what happens. You send a response, you await for, you send a request, you await for the response. Then all these processes occurs, then a response is given back to you, either in terms of an error or just the data that you want. Maybe you forgot to put the correct password. These operations maybe on the application server during the authentication is going to fail. Then you get an error. So that's how all these platforms work together so that they can be that communication. Okay. Now, as far as the installations, I'm using Visual Studio Code, so you can head to VS Code, then you can download VS Code or just download the text editor of your choice. Then as far as I've also installed Node, so you can go to Node and download Node.js long-term support. I would recommend, but you can also download the current version. And I've also downloaded Postman, which is a client site, so you can head to postman.com, then download Postman, and you'll be able to follow along with me. Okay, so those are the things that I've already installed before we even start. So let me close up this. Let me just minimize, and then on my desktop here I'm going to right click, then click on new folder, then we just say Node tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to right click that folder, then open with code. Okay, so this has come up, so we have our project there. So we can initialize our application by opening up the terminal there. You can click on new, or I'm just using a shortcut. I'm on Windows, so I'll press Ctrl and backtick. and you need to toggle the terminal, so you can just say npm init just to initialize our application, then hit enter. Then now we are going to have those BIOS version, press enter. Description, you can put in the description there. Entry point, index.js, then test command, git repository. Keywords, you can put in your words there. Author, you can put in your name, for example, Raymond K, or you can leave blank everything, it's not a crime. Then is this okay? Hit enter. Yes, so it's going to create a packet.json file, which we are going to see how we'll be using it. So we have the entry point there, the main, which is index.js. We have the description, which we can put in there. We have the version. We have the name of our application, the author, the license, as well as the script which is used to start the script. Okay, so I'm just going to install another environment that we need, so just say npm install, or you can just say npm I, which is for install. Then let's install Express. Let's also install nodemon. Nodemon will help us to save, to reload the saver whenever we save, so that we save ourselves time of reloading the saver again and again. You see how this works. So I'll also install UUID, hit enter. So wait for those to be installed. Now within my folder here in the root, I'm going to create a file called index.js, where we're going to create our server. So the first thing that we're going to do is bring in Express. So we say const Express is equal to require Express. So others use import Express from Express. It all works the same. So we can also bring body parser is equal to require, also require body dash parser. Then I can initialize our application. You can say const app is equal to Express. Then you can call this as a function. Then we can listen to the incoming connection. So we can say app.listen. So maybe we can just define our port. So let's say const port is equal to, let's go with 5000. Then app.listen. So we're going to listen to the port, incoming connections. Then we can log something to the console. So I'm going to use template literals, so we can say saver up and running. Save the changes, then go to the terminal. Then we'll just, this is how we run our server. We say node, then index.js, hit enter. So we see server up and running, and you can just say on port. Then you can use concatenation here, so you can say on port on that given port, and ... Save the changes. Then you have to kill the terminal to restart the server, so press Ctrl C. Then again we see server up and running on port 5000. Okay, now when we open up the browser and we go to localhost 5,000. So we see we have an error, cannot get /. This is because Express and Node is all about routing, so we haven't created our router or our path where we can go to. So let us do that. Before we do that, let me just include a middleware here. So you can just say app.use. So we are just saying we are going to use body parser.json as a function. Okay, perfect. So let's get our first route for home page. So we can say app.get. So we can pass through our route there. Then this is going to accept a callback function, which is request with parameters, request and response. Then we can put in our code there. So for now, let's say let's log something first to the console. So we can say console.log. Then we can say home page. Then we can also give a response to the user. So we can say response.send. So we can say maybe welcome to our home page. Okay, save the changes. Then you have to go back and kill the terminal and restart our server. Then when we go back, so we see welcome to our home page. So we have a path where we can go to, which is now what Express and Node is all about. Okay, so we see that at first we didn't have a path. Now we have a path where we can go to, and when a visitor client visits that path, this is what they are going to get as a response. Okay, those are the basics. This is how Node and Express works. It's all about routing. And now even in the console you can see home page. Now we can continue to write our routers in here and our conditions and everything, but it can get messy pretty quickly. So what programmers do and what we do is we create a separate folder just for routes, and within that route let me create a file called employees.js. Okay, so there I'll bring in Express just like we did. Require Express. Then we are going to define our route as well. So we say const router is equal to express dot router as a function. Then we can export this. So we say, when exporting this, we say module.exports, and this is equal to our given router. Now if we continue saving, killing the terminal, then this is taking our time, so we have to change this. We can go there, then here we can change this to start. Then I'm going to replace this, all of this text, with nodemon, then index.js. So this will help us to run nodemon. Let me just save the changes. Okay, cool. So now whenever I try to save we will see what will happen. So let's kill the terminal. So we are going to just say npm start instead of node index.js. So yeah, so this is cool. Starting node index.js, so it's watching, node-mon is watching our extensions. And now let me try to save. You see what happens, saying restarting due to changes. So this is handy. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get this route, the whole of it. Just going to cut. Okay, let me cut. Then let's paste this in the employees. Okay, perfect. So this is what we'll be writing all our routers for our application. So I'll just go back there. So since we have exported this, we need to import it into our server here. So we can just say let me just bring in a comment to say homepage router. Okay, so just say app.use. So we'll call the path there. Then this is going to return a callback function with parameters rake and raise. Then oh sorry, we are not writing a router. So in here we're going to we are going to bring in our router there, which we have included. So we get the path. So we have employees .js. Save the changes. Now we see that the app has crashed. So we need to find out what has caused that. Let me just remove. Okay. So we need to go back. App is not defined. Okay, perfect. So here it's because we don't have an app here, but we have router. Save the changes, and we see now the server is running. Okay, perfect. So when we go back and reload, we see that nothing has changed. So which means we have successfully imported that, bringing that router in here. Okay, cool. So the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to write another method, which will be the post method. So in here, pass in the path, then and the callback function, which is request and response as parameters. Then yeah, so the post method is going to help us to send data maybe to the server, or just to post data on a blog. Yeah, so that's how the post method works. So let's see this in action. So maybe we can log something to the console. So I can say console.log. So let's say employee has been created. Then we can also send a response to the client to say, let's just send the same response to say employee has been created. Okay, perfect. So let's save this. Now we cannot make a post request in the browser. That's why we have to use node-mon, because in here we can create most requests. So we have a get, post, put, patch, delete, copy, head, options, and all that. So what we are going to do, we are just going to copy this path here, then paste it in node-mon URL. Okay, so if we do a get request, so we see that we have welcome to our home page, which is the same thing we are doing in the browser. But if we change this to post, so we can send, then we have employee has been created. Okay, so even in the console there we have employee has been created. Perfect. So now imagine we have sent this data to a server. So let's create just a fake server. So let's say const employees, a fake database, is equal to maybe just an array of objects. So the first one, maybe we can have someone there with first name. Let's call them as John, with then a comma. Then we can have last name. Their last name can be let's say John Doe is common. Then let's also define our age. We can put in as many values as we can, maybe where they stay, the year they were born in, and all such. Okay, perfect. So we have our object there. Okay, so this is our simple database. So in the response here, instead of saying welcome to our home page, I'm just going to respond with employees. So employees will be displayed. So now when we send this data, we post this data. So let's just come here to the body, then raw data, then while it's text, change to JSON. So when we send here, you see you have nothing. Let me try to get this, copy that, then let's put in there. So we are sending now this data here to the server. So let's say this is 23 years. So can just have Johnny doing. So send that. See, employee has been created. Even here, employee has been created. But when we reload, we only have I'm using JSON formatter, so you can install this extension in Chrome or whatever browser you're using, just to display data correctly, or nicely, sorry. So this is our user. Now our user is just this one. We can't see the information that we have sent from Postman. Yeah, reason being, we haven't implemented the method to add this information we have sent, to user data we have sent to our database. So let's see where this information is in. So let's log something to the console. So we are just going to say request.body. Let's save that. Then let's go back. Then let's send this. See, employee has been created. Now when we go back in the console, because we have said console.log request.body, so you see we now have our data there in the console. Perfect. Now what do you think we can do so that we add this data we have received to the console. So what we need to do is we need first of all to store that data. So we can say const employee, we can call this as employee, which we have created, is equal to, is stored in the request.body. Now how do we add this? So after we have received this in the request.body, so how do we add this in our employees database? So we can say employees dot push, which is just a push method we can use. And what do we want to push? So we want to push this employee into that, and we are good to go. So let's save that and let's see now what this will happen. So when we get this, let's send, see employee has been created. So even there we see employee has been created. Now when we go back to the browser and reload, we can see, and for sure our employee is there, Johnny doing 23. Perfect. So that's how our post method is working. Now let's use let's say now we want to just get the data of one employee, so we will need their ID. So we already installed UUID in our when we just began. So we can just go to UUID documentation, which is an npm, to see how this works. So according to the documentation, we need first to install npm install, which we have already done. Then we can import that either using this, or since I'm using common.js, so I'll use this to import my UUID. So we can use maybe just a normal ID, but we want the ID to just be added automatically whenever we create a user, so that we have different IDs. So I'll paste that in. Then I'll just go down here in the employee. Now we need to add the ID, so we are going to use the spread operator for in JavaScript. If you are familiar with JavaScript, you know how this works. Just adding data to the already existing array, so you can use the spread operator. So just going to add to the current employee, then with their ID, then as UUID version 4 as a function. Okay, perfect. Now let's go back and see what will happen. So let's try again and send this data. So when we go to the browser here, whenever we save, we just remain with that, because our array is not keeping the information there unless we are using a real database, but this is just a Mac database. So whenever we save, whatever information we send from Postman won't be there. Okay, so let's try to send this. Now we only have one user, which is this one. So let's try to send this. Now if we send, we see employee has been created, and when we go back, we reload there, we see we also have an ID, which is very important. Okay, now let's go back, let's go forward and implement another router, which is router.get. But this time, if you check this router.get, we are getting all the employees, but we just want to get one employee's information without the others. Okay, how can we do that? So let's try to implement that. So here we need the employee's ID, then as well. We also need our parameters there, raise, then we implement our method there. So let's as well log something to the console. So we say console.log. Maybe we can okay, let's try to first of all get the ID, because we need the ID. Then we also need to find that user in the database so that we can see their details. Okay, so there are those two things. So to find the user, the specific user, we need the ID and a find method. So let's just store our ID there. So we say const ID. Now the ID is stored in request.params, just like the employee is stored in request.body, but the ID is stored in request.params. Then we can say const find that employee, because we are trying to find employee, is equal to so we can say in that employees database we need to find, so employees.find, so we need to find that employee and when we get them, their employee ID should match the ID that we have. Then we are going to get that specific user. Let's try to see this. Then let's send a response to the client. So here we can just say we can just send the employee that we have found. Okay, let's try to save this. Then we are going here, then we can do that. We remain with one. Let's add a user so we can send this. Employee has been added. Let's just change the age to 34, then the name to DG, then we can leave that as Joy, then send. Then we can go to our browser, then we see that we have Johnny and Joy. Now what if I just want to see Joy? So I'm going to get the ID, copy that. I can either use the browser or I can use Postman, paste that ID, append it to the URL and use the get method. So we do that, we see that we only have the data for Johnny because we appended the ID there. Okay, perfect. Our router is now working fine. So let's implement another router, but this time let's try to delete user information. So how do we delete user information? We need the ID as well. Then a callback function which accepts parameters, request and response. Then what do we need for that employee to be deleted? So we need the ID, so we say const ID is equal to request.params. Then we also need a function that is going to filter the ID of that employee we are looking for and leave the rest. So if the ID is not equal to the ID that we want, then we want to delete that particular user. You can read more about this to understand. So let's just say employees. We need not to store that data for the deleted user. So employees is equal to employees dot filter. We need to filter, then when we find that particular employee we are looking for, then the ID this time should not be equal to the ID that we have. Okay, so that if we haven't found that particular ID that we have, we won't delete it. If we found it, then we are going to delete it. So we filter. Okay, then we can just send a response to the user. So we can say response.send. So we can just say employee with okay, let's just put a simple one, employee successfully removed from the database. Okay, save the changes. Now let's go and try our application. So let's send some users. So we use the post method, remove that URL we appended. Let's send this. So we send that one, employee has been created, and then that input join whatever there, then the age 38, then we send. Okay, now let's try to delete. So if we reload, we have all those we have created. This one is just still there. So to delete that, we are going to get one of the users ID, then append it to the URL as well. Then here we use the delete method, then we send. So we see employee successfully removed from the database. Perfect. Now we have 4 users, so if we reload, we see we are remaining with 3. Again, if we get another ID, we go to postman, then remove that one and paste this, delete that user, employee successfully removed from the database. When we reload, we see we are removing. Can even remove the last one. So for that one again, we append the URL, delete that, employee successfully removed from the database, and we have deleted all the employees from the database. So this is how that one works. So last but not the least, let's look at a patch method, which is a router.patch, or we can use .put, but in this case let's use .patch. So let's implement the user's ID. Then we have a callback function which accepts those parameters. Then we're going to have that. So the patch method will need the request.body, not just the request.params. So what we'll need is we say const. So we need the user's first name, then we also need the user's last name, and we also need the age. So this is going to be request.body. That's where that information is stored. Then what else do we need? What do we think do we need? When we want to change something about a specific user, so we also need to get the ID. So we are going to say const id is equal to, this is request dot params. Perfect. So now in here we are going to have a certain condition. So we can have let's bring an if statement. So if we find the first name, what we want to do here is that we want that the employee's first name to be changed. So we need to find that specific employee. Okay, so we are going to need this function actually. Okay, perfect. So let's define that. So we can say const employee to be updated. Let's say const employee is equal to const employees is equal to employees dot find. Okay, so we want to find that specific employee that we need. Then after finding that employee, we want to get their ID, and the ID should match. So we say employee dot ID should be equal to the ID that we want. Okay, perfect. So if first name, so if we have the first name, so we are going to have employee dot first name should be changed to the current first name that we got. Okay, then the next thing is if we find the last name, then we should do the same to update that last name that we have found. So we are going to say employee dot last name should be equal to the new last name. Last but not the least is the employee's age. So if we find the age, if we want to change the age, then we need the employee.age to be updated to the current age that we got. Okay, now let us test this logic if it's going to work. So when we go back here, let's just post some users. Let's send this. So we see employee has been successfully created. We reload. Let's send another one. Just the same data. Employee has been successfully created. We reload. We see this. Now let's change one of the users so that they have different ages and names. So we are going to get this. Then we are going to use a patch method. Then we append that URL to that. So let's change this to Raymond. Okay, then we also change the name to programmer. Then we also change the age to 55, or maybe let's just do that. We leave everything. Okay, let's just change those two. We only change what we need. Okay, we can leave other things alone. So now let's send this. Okay, It's like we are awaiting a response, but it's not happening. But if we go back there and reload, we see we have Raymond K, who is a programmer. So we can as well send a response, because this is awaiting a response, which is not happening. So let's just say response.send. We can say employee with the name. Then here we can just concatenate. So we can say employee dot first name has been updated. Okay, let's save the changes. Let's go back. So you see, could not get a response. So let's send some data in. So go back here. Let's copy this. Actually, we copy this. And paste it in there. So let's do a post method. We send this. Employee has been created. Another one, employee has been created. So let's reload. We see that we have two John Does. So let's get this John Doe's ID and append it to this URL, because we want to edit. So we are going to say patch method. So let's change just the age. Okay, what we have there, John Doe. Okay, cool. Let's change the age to 78 and the name to John Raymond. Then let's send this. We do a patch method. We see employee with the name John has been updated. Perfect. So let's see our result. So we see now it's John Raymond, 78 years old, and this is the ID. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I think we have come a long way and we need to rest. We'll continue next time with another video. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so, just to support me and to encourage me to create more videos and improve. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.